The throne room of Prime stretched wider than any human building one had ever seen. Purple crystals lined the walls, pooling with soft light that made shadows dance across the polished floor. He stood in the center of it all, hands clenched at his sides, trying not to show fear. Around him, guards held weapons that hummed with energy. Their scaled skin reflected the crystal light, making them look even more dangerous. Queen Era sat on a throne carved from a single piece of black stone. She was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like molten gold. Right now, those eyes burned with anger as they stared down at one. "Explain yourself, human," the queen said. Her voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Why does my daughter call you husband?" One swallowed hard. Behind the queen stood Princess, her head bowed. Even from this distance he could see her hands trembling. 2 guards held her arms, preventing her from moving forward. "Your Majesty," one began, but the queen raised one hand to silence him. "Do you understand what you have done?" The queen leaned forward, her face twisted with rage. "Do you comprehend the insult you have brought to this house, to my empire?" One opened his mouth to respond, but his mind raced backward. How had it come to this? 6 months ago, everything had been so different. He remembered stepping off the human transport ship onto Prime for the first time. The sky had been orange, and 3 moons hung visible even in daylight. His colleague, had stood beside him with a tablet full of notes about customs. "Remember," she had said, adjusting her formal jacket, "the value hierarchy above everything. Always bow to royalty. Never make direct eye contact unless invited, and absolutely never touch anyone without permission." One had nodded, studying the palace in the distance. The human delegation had come to negotiate mining rights on one of Prime's outer moons. It was supposed to be simple, professional, safe. The first week had been nothing but formal meetings. One sat through endless discussions about trade agreements and mineral rights. The officials were polite but distant. They treated the humans like children who needed everything explained slowly. Then came the cultural exchange event. The palace's grand hall had been filled with displays from both human and civilizations. One had been examining an energy converter, genuinely impressed by its design, when he heard a voice behind him. "It's inefficient." He turned to find a young woman standing there. She was smaller than most of her kind, only about 2 meters tall, with silver scales that caught the light beautifully. Her eyes were curious rather than cold. "I'm sorry," one said. "The converter," she gestured at the device. "It wastes 17% of collected energy in the transfer process. I've told the royal engineers for years, but they insist tradition matters more than improvement." One blinked in surprise. "You're interested in engineering." "Is that so strange?" She tilted her head, a gesture he would later learn meant amusement. "No, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are," she said simply. Then, noticing his confusion, added, "Princess, but you may call me, the titles are exhausting." One's eyes widened. He started to bow, but she waved a hand dismissively. "Please don't. I spend all day watching people bow. It's refreshing when someone just talks to me like a person." She moved closer to the converter. "You're the human engineer, yes?" "One." "Yes, Your Highness." She insisted. "Tell me, how would humans solve the energy waste problem?" And just like that, they had fallen into conversation. One found himself explaining human engineering principles while shared technological history. She was brilliant, asking questions that showed deep understanding. More than that, she seemed genuinely excited to learn. "The problem with our society," had said at one point, lowering her voice, "is that we're so obsessed with doing things the way they've always been done. We have the oldest continuous civilization in this sector, and everyone acts like that means we must never change." One had noticed the sadness in her voice. "Change can be good." "Tell that to my mother." Over the following weeks, had found excuses to visit the human delegation's quarters. She claimed she was there for cultural research, but one suspected she just wanted someone to talk to who didn't treat her like a fragile piece of royal property. They discussed everything: technology, philosophy, art, was fascinated by human music. One played her recordings from Earth, watching her eyes light up at the sound of instruments she'd never heard before. "On my world," she had confided one evening, "royal marriages are arranged. I have no choice in the matter. My mother is already negotiating with Lord N's family." "Who's Lord N?" "A military commander, powerful, ruthless." His voice had grown quiet. "He treats his soldiers like property. I can only imagine how he'll treat a wife." "That's not right," one said firmly. "It's tradition." Looked at him with those golden eyes. "Tell me about human marriage. I've read that humans choose their own partners." So one had explained. He told her about love and partnership, about two people choosing each other because they wanted to build a life together, not because someone told them to. He described how his own parents had met, two engineers working on the same project, who had become friends first and lovers later. Had listened to every word like it was the most precious thing she'd ever heard. "That sounds beautiful," she whispered, "to be chosen to choose." They had warned him to be careful. "You're getting too close to the princess," she said. "This could cause problems." But one couldn't help himself. Every conversation with felt important. She wasn't just a princess to him anymore. She was a friend. Maybe more than a friend, though he tried not to think about that. Now, standing before Queen Era's fury, one understood just how right they had been. "I ask you again, human," the queen's voice brought him back to the present. "What have you done to my daughter?" One straightened his shoulders. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't lie. He wouldn't apologize for treating like the intelligent, capable person she was. "Your Majesty," he said clearly, "I have done nothing to the princess. We became friends. We shared knowledge and ideas. If that is a crime, then I am guilty." The queen's eyes flared brighter. Several guards stepped forward. "Friends?" The queen's laugh was bitter. "My daughter does not need friends. She needs to fulfill her duty to this empire. And yet she refuses her betrothal. She speaks of human concepts of choice and freedom. She calls you husband in the ancient language of courtship." One's heart raced. Had used courtship words. "I didn't know," he started. "Silence." The queen rose from her throne, her full height imposing. "You have poisoned my daughter's mind with your human weakness. You have made her forget her place, her duty, her heritage." Wu, the human security officer, stepped forward from where he'd been standing with the other human delegation members. "Your Majesty," Ambassador One meant no disrespect. "I will hear no more excuses." The queen raised all four arms. "You humans come to our world, pretend to seek partnership, and then corrupt the royal family. This alliance is finished." "Mother, please," his voice rang out. "He has done nothing wrong." The queen turned her burning gaze on her daughter. "You will be silent. You have shamed yourself in this house enough." One felt anger rising in his chest, pushing past his fear. This was wrong, all of it. And that's when he remembered something had mentioned weeks ago, almost in passing. An ancient law, a tradition so old that most had forgotten it existed. "Your Majesty," one said, his voice steady now, "I invoke the trial of worth." The entire throne room fell silent. Even the queen stared at him in shock. 3 months before the throne room confrontation, one had no idea how much his life was about to change. The human delegation had settled into a routine on Prime. Days were spent in tedious negotiations, evenings in their quarters reviewing progress and sending reports back to Earth. But had changed everything. She started appearing at unexpected times. Once, one found her waiting outside the human quarters just before dawn. The guards had looked uncomfortable but hadn't stopped her. She was royalty after all. "I wanted to see a human sunrise routine," she had said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "May I join you for breakfast?" They had nearly dropped her coffee cup when she saw the princess sitting in their small dining area, asking questions about how humans prepared their morning meals. But genuine curiosity was impossible to resist. Soon even practical Da found herself explaining Earth customs and laughing at its reactions. "You eat this every morning," held up a piece of toast, examining it from every angle. "Just heated grain with fruit spread. How simple." "Simple can be good," one said, smiling. "Yes," had replied, looking directly at him. "I'm beginning to understand that." The visits became regular, would arrive with questions about human culture, but the conversations always went deeper. She wanted to understand everything about Earth. Democracy, human rights, the concept of choosing your own path in life. "On Earth," one explained one afternoon while they walked through the palace gardens, "we believe every person has value, not because of who their parents are or what family they were born into, but because they're alive, because they exist." Was quiet for a long moment. The garden around them was beautiful, filled with plants that glowed softly in the fading light. "Here," she finally said, "your value is determined before you're born. I was valuable the moment I emerged from my mother because I was royal blood. A farmer's child, equally alive, equally capable of thought and feeling, has less value simply because of birth circumstances." "That doesn't seem fair," one said carefully. "No," agreed, "it doesn't." They sat on a bench carved from living crystal. One had learned that could shape certain materials with their minds, something humans couldn't do. But even with all their advanced abilities, they seemed trapped by their own traditions. "Tell me about your family," asked suddenly. One hesitated. He didn't talk about this often. "They died when I was 20. There was an accident at the colony where we lived, a reactor malfunction. I was off-world at university." "I'm sorry," his voice was gentle. She didn't touch him, but he could feel her sympathy. "It taught me something important," one continued. "Life is short. We don't always get to choose our circumstances, but we can choose how we respond. We can choose what matters to us." "Choice," repeated the word like it was sacred. "Everything comes back to choice for humans, doesn't it? It's important to us, maybe because we know how easily it can be taken away." Over the next weeks, they grew closer. One showed human music. He played her everything from classical symphonies to modern electronic compositions. She loved it all, but especially the old songs about love and freedom. "This one," she said, listening to a ballad about two people from different worlds finding each other. "Play this one again." One did, watching her face as she listened. Her eyes closed, and for a moment she looked peaceful. The weight of royalty seemed to lift from her shoulders. But reality always returned. One evening, arrived at the human quarters with tears in her eyes. One had never seen her cry before. It shocked him more than anything else could have. "What happened?" he asked, guiding her to a chair. "The betrothal ceremony has been scheduled," she said, her voice hollow. 2 weeks from now. My mother announced it at court today. Lord and stood there smiling like he'd won a prize." "Can't you refuse?" "No, refusing would shame my family. It could destabilize political alliances. My mother would never forgive me." Looked up at him. "I asked her once if I could choose my own husband. She laughed. She said I was too young to understand duty." "How old are you?" "By your years, 26, more than old enough to know my own mind." Hands clenched into fists. "And is cruel. Everyone knows it. He killed 3 soldiers last year for minor failures. Just executed them in front of their units. When I mentioned this to my mother, she said it showed strong leadership." One felt anger building in his chest. "That's not strength, that's tyranny." "Tell me about human marriage again," said quietly. "Please, I need to hear it." So one talked. He explained how humans approached partnership, how marriage was meant to be a team, 2 people supporting each other through life's challenges. He told her about couples who worked together, raised children together, grew old together by choice. The vows say for better or worse, he explained. It means you're choosing to stay together through good times and bad, but the key word is choosing. Every day you wake up and choose your partner again. That sounds like a beautiful way to live, whispered. It can be when it's real. Stood packing the small room. Humans have solved impossible problems before, haven't they? I've read your history. You survived ice ages, wars, plagues. You've adapted to hundreds of different worlds. You find solutions where others see only obstacles. We try, one said, not sure where this was going. Then help me solve this. Turned to face him. Help me find a way out of this marriage. There must be something in law, some exception, some alternative. One wanted to help. He wanted it more than anything, but he was also realistic. I'm not an expert in your laws. I don't even know where to start. The archives, she said suddenly. The royal archives contain every law ever written. If there's an answer, it's there. But I can't access them alone without raising suspicion. I need help from someone who has a legitimate reason to research culture. A human cultural, one said, understanding. They could request access. It's part of her job to understand your society. Hope lit eyes for the first time that evening. Would she help? Let me talk to her. They had not been happy when one explained the situation. They sat in her quarters, speaking quietly even though they were alone. This is dangerous, De said, shaking her head. We're here for trade negotiations, one, not to interfere in royal family politics. I know, but she's desperate. And honestly, this situation is wrong. Forcing someone into marriage is wrong. By human standards, yes, but we're not on Earth. Different cultures have different values. Some things transcend culture, one argued. The right to choose your own life partner is basic, it's fundamental. Decide, you care about her, don't you? This isn't just about helping someone in need. One was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. Yes, I care about her, but that doesn't change the fact that what's happening to her is wrong. If we get caught interfering, it could destroy human relations. We could start a diplomatic crisis. I know the risks. De studied him for a long moment. Then she grabbed her tablet. Fine. I'll request access to the archives tomorrow for cultural research purposes. But if this goes badly, we're all going to pay the price. The next 3 days, and De searched through thousands of years of legal documents. The archives were vast, containing everything from marriage laws to property rights to ancient battle codes. There must be something, said, her eyes tired from reading. Some precedent, some exception. It was one who found it, buried in a section about ancient courtship rituals from before the current dynasty. The trial of worth, he read aloud. In cases where a royal's intended match is contested, any individual may challenge for their hand through a trial of worth, as judged by the reigning monarch. The challenger must complete 3 tasks demonstrating their value to the empire. Grabbed the tablet from his hands, reading quickly. This is it. This is the answer. Wait, De said. Keep reading. Look at the historical notes. The notes were grim. The last time anyone had attempted the trial of worth was 400 years ago. They had failed. Before that, centuries earlier, another failure. In fact, there was no record of anyone ever successfully completing the trial. The tasks are designed to be impossible, De said. It's a legal formality that allows the monarch to reject unsuitable matches while appearing fair. But it exists, one said slowly. The law is still valid. You can't be serious, De stared at him. You want a challenge for the princess's hand. You're human. You're not even. The queen will design tasks specifically to destroy you. Probably, one agreed. But it's a chance. It's better than doing nothing. Looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You would do this. Risk everything for me. One met her eyes. In that moment, he understood the truth he'd been avoiding. This wasn't just about helping a friend. This wasn't just about fighting injustice. He had fallen in love with her. The throne room had erupted in chaos when one spoke those words. I invoke the trial of worth. Guards shouted. Court officials gasped. Even the queen seemed frozen in shock. In the sudden silence that followed, one could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Queen Era slowly lowered herself back onto her throne. Her 4 arms gripped the armrests, and one could see the muscles in them tense. When she spoke, her voice was dangerously quiet. You invoke the ancient trial. You, a human, dare to claim the right to challenge for my daughter's hand. The law doesn't specify species, one said, trying to keep his voice steady. It says any individual may challenge. I am an individual. The queen's eyes narrowed. You know what you're asking for. The trial has not been invoked in 400 years. No one has succeeded in twice that time. I know. One no's voice rang out. She struggled against the guards holding her. You can't, the tasks are impossible. But one didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the queen. Your Majesty, I formally request the trial of worth. According to ancient law, you must either grant it or publicly declare the law void. The queen's face twisted with anger. One had trapped her. If she refused, she would be admitting that her empire's ancient laws meant nothing. That tradition, which the valued above all else, could be cast aside when inconvenient. You are clever, human, the queen said finally. Too clever. Very well, I accept your challenge. But know this, when you fail, and you will leave this planet immediately. The human delegation will be expelled and our negotiations will end. Is that acceptable to you? Behind him, one heard Wu curse under his breath. De made a small sound of distress. He was gambling with more than his own future. He was risking the entire human presence on Prime. It's acceptable, one said. The queen smiled, but it was not a kind expression. Then hear your 3 tasks, human. First, you will face our champion in the arena. If you survive, you will enter the labyrinth of echoes. If you emerge with your mind intact, you will present to this court a demonstration of your worth to the Empire. You have 3 days to prepare for the first trial. I'll be ready. We shall see. The queen waved a hand dismissively. Remove him, and take my daughter to her chambers. She will not be permitted to see the human until this matter is resolved. Guards surrounded one, escorting him from the throne room. As he walked past, their eyes met for just a moment. He saw fear there, but also something else. Hope. Back in the human delegation's quarters, the reaction was immediate and loud. Have you lost your mind? Wu demanded. Do you understand what you've done? If you fail, we all get kicked off this planet. Months of negotiations gone. I know, one said quietly. De sat down heavily on a chair. The champion, do you even know who that is? No. I do, she pulled up information on her tablet. Commander, 2.5 meters tall, 4 arms, trained since childhood in combat. He's killed opponents in the arena before. Not practice fights, one. Actual deaths. One felt his stomach tighten, but he nodded. I expected something like that. Expected? Wu threw his hands up. You expected to fight a trained killer twice your size. What's your plan? Die heroically. My plan is to survive. How? De asked, genuinely curious despite her frustration. One sat down, his mind already working through the problem. This was what humans did best. When faced with impossible situations, they adapted. They found solutions others couldn't see. The trial isn't about being the strongest, he said slowly. It's about proving worth. The queen didn't say I had to defeat the champion. She said I had to survive. That's still basically impossible, Wu pointed out. Maybe, but humans have survived impossible situations before. One looked up at his colleagues. We survived predators stronger than us on Earth. We survived environments that should have killed us. We didn't do it through strength. We did it through intelligence, adaptation, and using every advantage we could find. De leaned forward. What are you thinking? I need to study the arena, understand the environment, learn everything I can about combat styles, find his weaknesses. And if he doesn't have weaknesses? Everyone has weaknesses, one said with more confidence than he felt. I just need to find them. The next 3 days were brutal. One spent every waking hour preparing. Pulled historical records of arena fights, letting him watch recordings of combat. Wu, despite his anger about the situation, helped one train physically. You're not going to beat him in strength, Wu said during their sessions. But you can use your size. You're smaller, faster, more flexible, make him work for it, wear him down. One learned that combat was all about power and honor. Fighters faced each other directly, showing their strength. Dodging too much was considered cowardly. Using the environment was seen as weak. Good, one thought, that gives me options. He requested permission to view the arena before the fight. To his surprise, the queen allowed it. Perhaps she thought it wouldn't matter. Perhaps she wanted him to see exactly what he was facing. The arena was enormous, an oval space with a sand floor and walls of smooth stone. But as one walked around it, he noticed details. Pillars supporting viewing platforms above. Uneven spots in the sand that suggested harder ground beneath. Shadows that fell at predictable angles based on the position of Prime's sun. Thinking like an engineer again, a voice said. One turned to find a priest standing nearby. The priest's robes were simple, unlike the elaborate clothing worn at court. Is that allowed? One asked. The trial doesn't forbid it. Most challengers think only of their courage, their honor, their strength. They forget to think. The priest studied him curiously. You are different from other challengers we've had. I'm human, we do things differently. So I'm learning. The priest gestured to the arena. Commander has fought here 23 times. He has never lost. There's a first time for everything. The priest's expression might have been a smile. Perhaps. Tell me, human, why do you attempt this trial? Surely you know the odds are against you. One was quiet for a moment. Then he said simply, because she deserves to choose her own life, and I'm the only one willing to fight for that right. Even if it costs you everything. Even then. The priest nodded slowly. The labyrinth will test you more than the combat will. I hope you understand that. The champion can only kill your body. The labyrinth can destroy your mind. I'll face that when I come to it. First, I need to survive tomorrow. The night before the trial, one couldn't sleep. He lay in his quarters, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 6 months ago, he'd been a simple engineer on a diplomatic mission. Now he was preparing to fight an alien warrior in single combat. For a woman he loved. Because that's what this was really about. Not just justice or principle, though those mattered. He loved. Somewhere between their conversations about engineering and their discussions of freedom, he'd fallen completely in love with her. And tomorrow, he might die trying to save her from a life she didn't want. A soft knock came at his door. One opened it to find her standing there with a small package. Couldn't sleep either, she said, offering him the package. I made you something. Inside was a light armor vest, constructed from human materials. It wouldn't stop a direct hit from weapons, but it might help with indirect blows. The rules don't forbid armor, De said. I checked. Thank you, one said, genuinely touched. Don't thank me yet, just survive tomorrow. De hesitated, then added, for what it's worth, I think what you're doing is insane, but it's also maybe the bravest thing I've ever seen. Or sometimes those are the same thing, De smiled sadly. Get some rest. Tomorrow you're going to need every advantage you can get. After she left, one finally managed a few hours of sleep. He dreamed of Earth, of the colony where he'd grown up, of his parents. In the dream, his father said something he'd often said in life. The human advantage isn't in our strength, son. It's in our refusal to give up. We're too stubborn to know when we're beaten. One woke before dawn. He dressed carefully, putting on the armor vest Dad had made. He ate a simple breakfast, knowing he needed energy, but his stomach was too nervous for much food. Then Wu arrived to escort him to the arena. The stands were filled with citizens, all come to watch the human challenge their champion. One walked onto the sand, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes on him. Across the arena, Commander emerged from the opposite entrance. He was everything the reports had said and more. Massive, muscular, with scars crisscrossing his scaled skin. He carried no weapons. He wouldn't need them. The Queen's voice echoed across the arena through some kind of amplification system. Let the trial of worth begin. Fight until one cannot continue. Smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. He started walking toward One, each step confident and measured. One took a breath, remembering everything he'd learned, every advantage he'd identified, every plan he'd made. Then the champion charged, and One's fight for survival began. Moved faster than something his size should be able to move. One moment he was 10 meters away, the next his massive fist was swinging toward One's head. One dropped and rolled, feeling the air whistle above him as the blow passed. The crowd roared. One came up running, putting distance between himself and the champion. His heart hammered in his chest, but his mind was clear. This was it. Survive or die. Turned, that confident smile still on his face. You run well, human, but the arena is only so large. He was right, the space was limited. One couldn't just keep running, he needed a strategy. His eyes scanned the arena, seeing the details he'd memorized. The pillars, the uneven sand, the shadows. Charged again. This time One ran toward one of the support pillars, waiting until the last second before diving aside. The champion's momentum carried him forward, crashing into the stone. The impact would have shattered human bones, but just shook his head and laughed. Clever, but tricks won't save you. One circled, keeping the pillar between them. His training on Earth had been mostly intellectual, but he'd grown up in a colony where everyone learned basic survival skills. He knew how to read an opponent, how to use terrain, how to turn weaknesses into strengths. And his weakness right now was obvious. He was smaller, weaker, less armored. In a direct fight would destroy him in seconds. So he wouldn't fight directly. Came around the pillar and One ran again. But this time he kicked sand up as he moved, sending it into the champion's eyes. Roared in anger, swiping at his face. Coward tactics, someone in the crowd shouted. Good, One thought, let them think that. He didn't care about their opinion of his honor. He cared about surviving. He led on a chase around the arena, never staying still, always moving. He used every pillar, every shadow, every uneven patch of sand. When got close, One would drop or dodge, making the champion's powerful strikes hit empty air. Minutes passed, then 10 minutes, 20. One's lungs burned and sweat poured down his face, but he noticed something important, was breathing harder too. For all his strength, the champion wasn't used to prolonged chases. Combat was about power and quick victories, not endurance. Humans, though, humans were built for endurance. Back on Earth, ancient humans had hunted by running prey to exhaustion. They weren't the fastest or strongest, but they could keep going when other species dropped. So that's what One did. He kept moving, kept making chase him, kept forcing the champion to use his strength against nothing but air and stone. Half an hour passed. The crowd's cheers had turned to confused murmurs. This wasn't the fight they'd expected. His movements were slower now, his attacks less precise. Frustration showed on his face. Stand and fight, demanded. Stop running like prey. One didn't answer. He was too busy breathing, too focused on survival. But he noticed the champion was favoring his left side slightly. That last collision with the pillar had hurt him more than he was showing. Another 10 minutes was definitely slowing. His massive frame, built for power, required enormous energy to maintain, and one had been making him waste that energy for almost an hour. Then made a mistake. He overextended on a strike, his balance shifting too far forward. One saw his chance. He ducked under the arm and drove his shoulder into his knee, using the champion's own momentum against him. Stumbled. For the first time, he went down on one knee. The arena fell silent. One stepped back, hands raised, breathing hard. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "I just need to survive this trial. Yield and we can both walk away." His eyes blazed with fury. A champion does not yield to humans. He surged to his feet, attacking with renewed rage. But rage made him sloppy. One dodged and weaved, letting the champion's anger work against him. Each missed strike tired more. Each wasted burst of energy brought him closer to exhaustion. Finally, after another 20 minutes, dropped to both knees. His chest heaved as he gasped for air. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him. One stood a few meters away, equally exhausted but still on his feet. The Queen's voice rang out across the arena. "The human survives. The first trial is complete." One nearly collapsed in relief. He'd done it. Against all odds, he'd survived. But there was no time to celebrate. Guards escorted him from the arena while medical staff rushed to attend to. As one walked past, the champion spoke quietly. "You fought without honor, human." "I fought to survive," one replied. "Sometimes that matters more than honor." Actually smiled at that, though it was pained. "Perhaps the labyrinth will be worse, much worse." They gave one day to rest before the second trial. He spent it recovering physically and mentally, preparing for what was to come. Da brought him information about the labyrinth of echoes. "It's not a physical maze," she explained. "It's a mental and spiritual trial. You'll be exposed to some kind of energy field that makes you face your deepest fears, your worst memories, your greatest regrets. Most who enter come out broken." "How do I prepare for that?" "I don't think you can. It's different for everyone." The next morning, they led one to a chamber deep beneath the palace. In the center stood a circular platform surrounded by glowing crystals. A priest waited beside it. "Once you step onto the platform," the priest explained, "the labyrinth will begin. You cannot leave until you either reach the center or your mind breaks. If you feel yourself losing control, call out and we will extract you. But that will count as failure." One nodded. "I understand." He stepped onto the platform. The crystals flared bright and the world dissolved. Suddenly one stood in the colony where he'd grown up, but something was wrong. The buildings were on fire. People ran screaming. He recognized this. The reactor failure. The day his family died. "No," he whispered. "This isn't real. This is the labyrinth." But it felt real. He could smell the smoke, feel the heat, hear the screams. And there in the distance, he saw his parents standing near the reactor complex. His feet carried him forward without conscious thought. He had to save them. He had to warn them. But as he ran, the distance never got shorter. They stayed impossibly far away. "It's not real," he told himself again. "It's just fear, just memory." The scene shifted. Now he was in the arena but was crushing him. He felt ribs breaking, felt the pain of defeat. He heard crying as she was dragged away to Marianne. "This is what happens when you fail," a voice whispered. It sounded like his own. "This is what happens when you're not strong enough." One wanted to fight the images, to deny them. But then he remembered something his father had told him once. "Fear is natural. Trying to be fearless is stupid. The brave aren't those without fear. They're the ones who feel fear and act anyway." So instead of fighting the fear, one acknowledged it. "Yes," he said to the labyrinth. I'm afraid I'll fail. I'm afraid I'll lose. I'm afraid I'm not strong enough or smart enough or good enough. I'm terrified." The images flickered. "But fear doesn't stop me. It never has. I'm afraid and I'm going to keep moving forward anyway." The scene changed again. Now he saw himself as a child, watching his parents work on engineering projects. His father looked at him and said, "You'll never be as good as us, you know. You're not smart enough." But this time, one recognized it as false. His real father had never said that. His real father had believed in him completely. "That's not my father," one said firmly. "That's my own doubt wearing his face, and I reject it." The labyrinth seemed to shudder. It showed him more fears, more doubts, more regrets. Every mistake he'd ever made, every failure, every moment of weakness. But one faced each one honestly. "Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I failed sometimes. Yes, I'm not perfect, I'm human, that's what we are. We're flawed, we're scared, we mess up, but we keep trying, we keep learning, we keep moving forward." He walked through the illusions, acknowledging each one but not letting them stop him. He didn't try to be fearless. He didn't try to convince himself he was perfect. He just accepted his humanity, all of it, good and bad. Finally, he reached a center point where all the images fell away. He stood in darkness, alone. "Why do you continue?" a voice asked. It wasn't his this time. It sounded ancient and tired. "You know you might fail, you know the odds are against you. Why keep fighting?" "Because she's worth it," one said simply. "Because love matters more than fear. Because choosing to try, even when success isn't guaranteed, is what makes us human." Light bloomed around him. Suddenly he was back on the platform, surrounded by shocked priests. They stared at him like he was something impossible. "How long was I in there?" one asked. 3 hours, the head priest said, voice full of wonder. "Most break within 30 minutes. The last challenger to complete the labyrinth took 6 hours and emerged barely able to speak. You completed it in 3 and you seem whole." One felt exhausted but not broken. "What's next?" "You rest. Tomorrow, you present your demonstration of worth to the queen and her court." That night, one sat with Dan Wu, trying to figure out what to present. "You need to show them something they don't have," Da said. "Some value humans bring." "They're more advanced than us in most ways," Wu pointed out. "Technology, science, even arts. What can you show them that they'll care about?" One thought about everything he'd learned during his time on Prime. They were powerful, ancient, advanced. But they were also rigid, bound by tradition, afraid of change. And then he knew exactly what to present. The throne room was filled with nobility, all gathered to witness the final trial. One stood in the center once again, but this time he felt different. He'd survived the champion. He'd conquered the labyrinth. Now came the hardest part of all, proving his worth to people who already believed he had none. Queen Era sat on her throne, her face unreadable. Beside her stood Lord N, the military commander who was supposed to marry. He looked amused, as if this was all a waste of time. Was there too, standing with guards on either side. One's eyes met hers for just a moment, and he saw such hope there that it made his chest tight. "Human," the queen spoke, her voice carrying through the chamber. "You have survived our champion and emerged from the labyrinth with your mind intact. These achievements are unexpected, but now comes the true test. Show us what worth you bring to the empire. Convince us why we should accept a human into our royal family." One took a breath. He'd prepared for this all night. "Your Majesty, honored members of the court," he began, "I cannot claim to bring superior technology. Your science is more advanced than human science. I cannot claim to bring military strength. Your warriors are more powerful than human soldiers. I cannot claim to bring wealth. Your empire controls resources beyond human imagination." Lorden snorted. "Then what can you possibly offer?" "Something you've lost," one said quietly. "Something your empire desperately needs. Innovation through diversity, the willingness to change." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The queen's eyes narrowed. One continued, his voice growing stronger. "They are ancient and powerful. Your civilization has lasted thousands of years. But in all my time here, I've noticed something. You've stopped growing. You rely on the same methods your ancestors used. You follow the same traditions. You see change as dangerous rather than necessary. Tradition gives us strength, an elder noble called out. Tradition gives you stability, one agreed. But stability without growth is stagnation. Let me prove this to you. He pulled out a tablet that they had prepared. On it were schematics for the planetary shield system that protected Prime. Your shield has a flaw, one said. A 17% energy loss in the transfer system. Princess identified this years ago and told your engineers. They dismissed her concerns because changing the design would break from traditional construction methods. The chief engineer in the court shifted uncomfortably. Last night I worked with 3 of your younger engineers, one continued. Engineers who were willing to look at the problem differently. We approached it not by asking, how have we always done this? But by asking, what's the best way to do this? The result is a modification that reduces energy loss to 3% while maintaining all traditional safety features. He displayed the new design on the viewing screens around the throne room. Engineers leaned forward, studying it intently. This would work, one of them admitted, sounding surprised. Of course it works, one said, because we combined knowledge with human methodology. Your engineers know your systems better than any human ever could, but they're constrained by tradition. Humans aren't. We question everything. We assume nothing is impossible. We try things that conventional wisdom says won't work. The Queen leaned forward. You speak of methods, show me results. One nodded to Duh, who stood near the edge of the room. She activated a device they'd built overnight. It projected a real-time simulation of the shield system with and without the modifications. With traditional design, the shield can maintain full power for 72 hours under sustained attack, one explained. With our modification, that extends to 106 hours, a 50% increase in defensive capability using the same resources. The throne room fell silent as the nobility processed this. Finally, the chief engineer spoke. Why did you not simply present this improvement yourself, human? Why make it part of your trial? Because the improvement isn't what matters most, one said. What matters is how we achieved it. 3 engineers worked with 1 human. They brought expertise. I brought perspective. Together, we accomplished something none of us could have done alone. That's the value I bring. Not my personal skills, but what becomes possible when different perspectives work together. He looked directly at the Queen. Your empire has been isolated for too long. You've perfected your traditions so thoroughly that you've forgotten how to adapt them. The galaxy is changing around you. New species, new technologies, new challenges. You can either remain rigid and eventually break, or you can learn to bend, to grow, to incorporate new ideas while maintaining your core values. You speak dangerously, Lorden said, his voice cold. You suggest our ways are inferior. No, one said firmly. I suggest they're incomplete, just as human ways are incomplete without other perspectives. Strength comes from diversity, not uniformity. Queen Era studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was like ice. Pretty words, human, but we come now to the real question, the reason for all this theater. She stood, descending from her throne. My daughter has declared herself bound to you in the old words of courtship. She calls you husband. She refuses her proper betrothal because of you. You have completed the trials, yes. You have shown some cleverness, but I ask you now before my court, what are your true intentions? Do you seek power through my daughter? Do you wish to elevate yourself above your station? This was it, the real trial. One had expected this. No, your majesty, he said quietly. I seek only one thing, happiness. Happiness, the Queen repeated the word like it was foreign. You would disrupt an empire for happiness. Yes, because happiness matters. Because forcing someone into a life they don't want, even for political convenience, is wrong. The Queen's face flushed with anger. You dare lecture me about right and wrong. You presume to understand my daughter better than I do. I am her mother. I have known her since birth. You have known her mere months." "You're right," one said. "I haven't known her as long, but I've listened to her. I've heard what she wants. I've seen who she truly is, not who you need her to be." "Careful, human," the queen warned. But one couldn't stop now. "She's brilliant. She understands engineering better than most of your specialists. She has ideas that could revolutionize your technology. But you've never listened because she's supposed to be a proper princess who smiles and marries whoever you choose. She has duties. She has potential," one's voice rose. "Potential you're wasting because it doesn't fit your traditional expectations. You're so focused on who she should be that you can't see who she actually is." The queen's 4 arms trembled with rage. "You forget yourself." "Maybe, but someone needs to say this. Your Majesty, I have nothing but respect for you and your empire. But in this one thing you're wrong. Deserves the right to choose her own path. Not because human values say so, but because she's earned that right through her own intelligence and capability. And you believe you're worthy of her." One paused. Then honestly he said, "No, I'll never be worthy of her. She's amazing in ways I can't even fully describe. But I love her, I respect her. I see her for exactly who she is, and I think she's perfect. Not perfect as in flawless, but perfect as in complete, whole, real." The queen stepped closer, towering over him. "I could have you killed for your insolence." "Yes, your Majesty, you could. I could exile all humans from space." "That too. So why do you stand here, risking everything for one person?" One met her burning gaze without flinching. "Because love isn't a calculation. It's not about weighing risks against rewards. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be better and choosing them every day. Makes me want to be the best version of myself. And I hope I do the same for her." The throne room was silent. No one seemed to breathe. Then Queen Era did something unexpected. She laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh, but it wasn't entirely bitter either. "You are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, human. I haven't decided which." She turned to address the court. "Leave us, all of you. I would speak with this human alone." The nobility filed out, confused and curious. Even the guards left. Only one, the queen, and remained. When they were alone, the queen's shoulders sagged slightly. She suddenly looked tired. "Do you know why I arranged the betrothal to Lord N?" she asked quietly. "Politics, I assumed," one said. "Partially, but also protection. And is powerful, ruthless. I thought having him as family would keep safe from other threats." The queen looked at her daughter. "I never asked if she felt safe from him." Spoke for the first time. "Mother, I don't need protection from outside threats. I need the freedom to protect myself." "I know that now." The queen turned back to one. "I have watched you these past days. I've heard reports of your actions. You defeated not through strength but intelligence. You survived the labyrinth by accepting your fears rather than denying them. And now you stand here, knowing I could destroy you, and you speak truth anyway." "Truth is all I have, your Majesty." "Yes, and that is what finally convinces me." She took a deep breath. "Here is my decision, human. I will not give my blessing for you to marry my daughter today." One's heart sank, but the queen held up a hand. "You will live among the for 1 year. You will learn our language, our customs, our ways. You will prove that your commitment is not temporary infatuation but genuine dedication. During this time, we'll also be free to learn about humans, to be certain of her own feelings. At the end of 1 year, if you both still wish to marry, I will give my blessing." Hope surged in one's chest. "Your Majesty, I'm not finished. You will also work with our engineers. You will help us improve, modernize, not by abandoning our traditions but by building on them. You will be a bridge between human innovation and knowledge." "I will gladly." The queen looked at her daughter. "And you will take on real responsibilities in the empire. No more sheltering you from leadership. If you wish to be treated as capable, you will prove it through action. Bowed deeply, "Thank you, mother." For a long moment the queen studied them both. Then quietly she said, "I was young once, before I was queen. I loved someone my mother didn't approve of. She forced me to marry your father for political reasons. It was not a happy union. He was a good man but not the right man for me." Looked shocked, "Mother, I never knew." "Because I never said. Because queens don't show weakness. But watching you these months, seeing your misery at the prospect of marrying in, I remembered my own misery. And I wondered if tradition is worth the cost of our children's happiness." The queen placed one hand on shoulder and another on one's. "You asked why my daughter calls you husband, human. At first I thought it was rebellion. Then I thought it was foolishness. But now I understand. She calls you husband because you treat her as an equal, because you listen to her, because you see her value when others, including her own mother, have been blind to it." One felt tears in his eyes. "Your Majesty." "1 year," the queen said firmly but not unkindly. "Prove yourself worthy not just through trials but through consistency, through genuine effort to understand us, through respect for what we are, even as you help us become more. Can you do this?" "Yes, Your Majesty, I can." The queen stepped back. "Then go, both of you, you have much work ahead." 1 year later, the throne room was decorated for a wedding that combined human and traditions. One stood in formal robes that blended styles from both cultures. He'd learned to speak fluently. He'd studied their history, their art, their philosophy. He'd worked with their engineers on a dozen projects, each one bringing human and knowledge together in new ways. And he'd courted properly by both human and standards, long conversations about everything, formal dates approved by the queen, slow building of trust and understanding. Now, as walked toward him in marriage garments that honored both their peoples, one felt his heart might burst. The ceremony was beautiful, words in both languages, promises that meant the same thing in any tongue: commitment, partnership, love. Afterward at the reception, Queen Era approached one privately. "You have kept your promises, human," she said. "You have shown dedication. You have brought genuine benefit to my empire, and you have made my daughter happier than I have ever seen her." "She makes me happy too, Your Majesty." "I know, that is why I give you this." She handed him a small crystal. "It was my mother's and her mother's before her. It is given to those who marry into the royal family. It represents acceptance. Welcome, son-in-law." One accepted the crystal, two moved to speak. The queen's expression softened. "You asked me once why my daughter calls you husband. Now I ask you, human, what is it about my daughter that made you willing to risk everything?" One looked across the room at who was laughing with Dan and some friends. "She challenged me to be better. She showed me that differences don't have to divide us. They can strengthen us. She's brave and brilliant and kind. She deserves a universe that sees all of that, and I get to spend my life making sure she knows how amazing she is." Queen Era nodded slowly. "That is a good answer, the right answer." She paused, then added, "You have taught me something, one. You have taught me that strength comes in many forms, that tradition is important but so is growth, that love, when it is real, is worth fighting for." "Your Majesty, you taught me something too. You taught me that even the most powerful people can change, can admit when they're wrong, can choose their children's happiness over their own pride. That takes more courage than any trial I faced." For the first time since he'd met her, Queen Era smiled genuinely. "Perhaps we humans and are not so different after all." "No, Your Majesty, we're very different, but maybe that's exactly why we need each other." As the celebration continued around them, one rejoined. She took his hand, and they stood together, two people from different worlds who had found common ground in the most important place of all. In love, in respect, in the choice to build something new while honoring what came before. and in the understanding that the best solutions often come from the most unexpected places, from the courage to question tradition, and from the willingness to listen to voices that speak differently than your own. That was the human way. And now it was becoming the way too.